I loved to move fast. And I thought more about that and like all the feedback that I got about that, how it was both a good thing and a bad thing. I want to be in a place where velocity is the currency for success. It is a human capital efficiency problem that is very exciting to be in. If we can sort of cement ourselves as the de facto vetting layer, if we can cement ourselves as a thought leader within the hiring world, within the skills economy, that is a really, really powerful goal to go after. We're not just providing sort of tests that are simple, generic things. They're large project-based assessments that simulate real-world scenarios where, hey, it turns out in the real world, you're going to need to use Cursor. You're going to need to use Devin. You're going to need to use some of these AI tools. And so what if we could vet you for how you can use Cursor? I have agency. I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm digging myself into new tools. I'm talking to customers. I'm stretching myself to so many different dimensions, and that is very exciting for me. The connotation of junior to senior role, throw that out of the window.
Welcome to The Stroll Season 1. I'm your host, Sam Thompson. In this season, I'll work to engage in conversations that dive deep into the intricacies of each guest's unique career, while also bringing to light the reality of how each guest maintains their health in the professional culture they work in. In this episode, I speak with Adam Liang. Adam went to the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in 2022 with a degree in mechanical engineering. After UPenn, Adam joined McKinsey's New York office, working primarily with software businesses on go-to-market strategy across sales, marketing, and pricing. Fortunately, I had the opportunity to work with Adam while at the firm. Adam left McKinsey in March of 2025 to join Ropes AI as the founding COO of the business and the company's first hire. Ropes is an AI company building technology to more effectively vet talent in the AI era, and they announced their $3.1 million seed round in April of 2025. Before jumping into today's episode, I'd like to briefly mention our charity partner, Sochabe, a federally recognized and registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. Sochabe is a grassroots charity organization that recently built Seminole Academy outside of Mbala, Zambia. For those who don't know, Zambia is a country in southern Africa. Sochabe was founded by my lifelong friend, Teza Simonyola, who named the Seminole Academy after his father. Teza is a lifelong tennis player and was ATP and ITF ranked in his heyday and was a member of the Zambian Davis Cup team. He started Sochabe over a decade ago and went on to build Seminole Academy to give the children in his home village the opportunity to attend school. Sochabe emphasizes academics while also providing students with the opportunity to play sports outside of school. If you'd like to donate to Sochabe, the PayPal donation link can be found at sochabe.com. That's SOCHABE.com. I'd like to highlight that Sochabe operates with virtually no overhead. Every single penny that is donated ends up directly funding education, school maintenance and development, and equipment. When Teza travels to Zambia to visit the school, he pays for his flights out of his own pocket. Once again, you can donate at sochabe.com, that's SOCHABE.com, to support Seminole Academy and Teza's goal of bringing education to the children of his home village. Thank you. It's time to stroll. Here's my conversation with Adam.
Senior Business Analyst to COO, and this transition happened maybe in the past month or so. How has that been, going from more of a junior role to now you're one of the first hires of a startup and now in what you would call a C-suite role?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the connotation of junior to senior role, throw that out of the window. I'm still doing a lot of the same things that you would conventionally think of like as an individual contributor doing. I think like probably one of the interesting moments is, as a junior role at McKinsey, primarily working in PowerPoint, Excel, all of those fun tools. You would think that if I went into like a COO role, I'm going to be managing a whole team. Not the case, right? Ropes AI is kind of a 3-person shop right now. We're going to expand a lot. And over time, I'll step into those leadership roles. For example, running a sales team, running a marketing team, running a customer success team, running a biz ops team. All of these teams can be sizes of 10 to 50 people. We're not quite there yet, and I'm excited to get into those roles. But for now, it's a lot of the same things of I need to do an analysis. I need to make a decision very fast. What do I need to do? What are all the inputs I need to collect to make that decision? In the past few weeks, I've used probably 15, 20 different tools that I've never used before. Figma, Apollo for outbound, figuring out how to use Clay to enrich lead data, Koala for intent signaling when someone visits Google Ads, LinkedIn Ads. So I'm still doing a lot of the same stuff that I would have typically done, sort of at a junior role at any given tech company in a similar strategy or ops role. So I don't think it's changed too much, but I am very excited to get to that point where I'm jumping in all these meetings and starting to think about like, what is the direction of where this product can go and where this company can go.
And from my personal experience, I know that when you're at McKinsey and you pretty much hit that beyond 1 year mark, you'll start getting reached out to by a lot of people in the startup space that potentially joining anywhere from maybe a brand new startup in one of the first 10 hires or a startup that may be at 100, 200 people. What about ropes to you made it a worthwhile opportunity to leave a firm like McKinsey to then go pursue this opportunity?
Yeah, I think it was probably like 3 things. I think the first thing that I was really excited about was that it was very familiar in the sense that the founder was my best friend from college. Quick backstory on Ken. So Ken Schumacher founded Ropes in 2023. I went to college with him. We were in the same fraternity. We had done a lot of projects together, planning parties to actual assignments in classes. And I've just been following his journey for a while. And we both knew that we worked really well together and that there will be some point down the road where we do something together, where it's doing an adventure together, or me working for him, or him working for me, or us just collaborating on different ideas. So I was very excited to just work with him. That's number 1. Number 2 is, if I think about all the filters of decision-making of leaving McKinsey for a startup, or even just leaving McKinsey broadly, the last thing you should consider is, am I going to make money out of this? Like, is this going to accumulate wealth, multi-generational wealth? That could be a factor for some people, but it definitely wasn't for me. And my advice is like, don't really think about that too much. The number 1 thing that I thought about was career growth opportunity. Opportunity to learn at a very fast pace that you wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. I will say, McKinsey, I learned a lot. I learned a lot very fast. But the ability to step into like multiple different shoes, like I mentioned before, like I'm doing design, I'm doing marketing, I'm learning how to do Google Ads. I'm like hopping in a phone booth and outbounding and calling our ideal customer. I'm going to conventions and I'm going to events and trying to land new customers, and I'm doing customer success. And having that opportunity to figure out like, what am I really good at and where do my skills really shine, and over time specialize and move into a role or move into a space where where my skills really align with my interests. That matters a lot. And then I think the third thing is the company itself is a really exciting space to be in. Ropes AI is essentially a technical screening platform. We're developing a new way for businesses of all sizes to vet technical talent. So engineering talent, software engineering, data science, IT roles. We're building a new way for companies to assess that talent. I usually think of it in 2 ways, right? The first is that we're building these custom problems that are very specific to a job description, to what you really want out of the talent. Soft skills, hard skills. And we're also building a way for you to have all the granular signals that you typically wouldn't have from top of the funnel recruiting screening. For example, how did this person approach debugging? How did this person approach the problem itself? Did they consider alternative A versus alternative B? And why did they eventually choose alternative C? And today, like, there aren't many tools out there that pick up on all these signals and can be deployed at a very at-scale manner. Mm-hmm. All of our tests right now are asynchronous. So they're done. You click on a link as a software engineering candidate, and you hop onto the experience, which, by the way, a lot of our candidates love this experience. You hop on, and we track everything. And we want to basically frame it as a way that showcases your skills to the employer or to wherever you want to land your next position. So it's a really, really exciting product. It's solving a very hard problem. And I think it can go in a lot of different product directions, more importantly. Right now, we're focusing on IT and engineering talent, but it can go into design roles. It can go into finance and consulting roles like what we did before. It can go into healthcare. It can go into manufacturing roles. So I'm very excited about the different skill domains that it can go into. But what's also interesting is that if you think about skill domains as the first axis, there's another really cool axis that sort of Ropes sees as its long-term vision, right? And that's different parts of the talent journey. Right now, we're in the vetting part. So screening if somebody is the right fit. There's also parts before that, like sourcing. Where in the United States or where in the world is talent residing? Where is there really a high supply of high quality talents or talent that I can go and go after? And then after you vet them, once they've entered the company, there's a whole suite of skills-based activities that you need to do. Onboarding a candidate, upskilling the candidate. If someone comes in as a Java developer, I want to put them into maybe a front-end role or into a full-stack role or into a role that's like sort of language agnostic. Or I want to see them step up into a role that requires more product acumen. So how can we then start to find ways to upskill the existing employees at a specific company? So for those three reasons, like it was just like a very, really exciting moment for me to join for the visceral problem, the founder that I have a really good relationship with, and sort of the career growth opportunity.
When you mentioned in terms of the process of using ropes to vet talent, you mentioned that you've gotten good feedback from engineers in terms of their experience, maybe given that it is asynchronous. And it almost seems to me like the framing is that you want to create a process that helps an engineer as much as possible to showcase the skills they could bring to a company. In the design process, how are you balancing maybe optimizing for the engineer's experience and then for your customer who would potentially use ropes to vet their talent?
Yeah, so we're balancing on both sides, right? We think about the personas. There's usually like three different personas that we're thinking about in this whole workflow. The first is the candidate. The second is the actual sort of hiring manager on the HR side. So like a VP of talent acquisition or a head of talent acquisition. And then there's also the business line specific head that we're trying to put this role into. So that could be a VP of engineering. It could be a VP of data science. It could be a partner at McKinsey and Company. Across all three of those roles, we want to make sure we're meeting their needs to the nth degree that we can. In today's world, with some of the assessment tools out there, they're maybe more focused on landing new customers. So they may be focused more on the hiring manager, or they might be more focused on the VP of engineering, and they create an experience that candidates don't really like, or it's an experience that candidates are very easy. They're able to cheat on really easily. And so across all three of those fronts, we're doing some interesting things. On the candidate side, we're sort of framing it so that your first initial onboarding is really exciting for you to start. You can change the theme of the environment. You can switch to an environment that you want, whether it's VS Code or Jupyter or Eclipse or other IDEs that you want. And we also want to make sure the messaging is right. And this messaging can be fine-tuned to whatever our customers want. For example, if you're like a large enterprise, like let's take like Instacart or Kroger, for example, you want it to be completely white labeled with their branding, their colors, like their avatars that they have. Welcome to the Kroger experience. And more importantly, we want to make it sure that, hey, in this 30 minutes or in this hour, you as candidate A, you have full reign on the domains of this problem to show what you want, because we want you to show our team what you're capable of. And that messaging goes a long way. Because you want to make sure that their incentives are fully aligned and that they're kind of happy to take this test and they're very excited to take this test. On the hiring manager on the HR side and on the sort of VP of engineering side, with our custom problems, we want to make sure that they're not just serving up generic tests, because generic tests is equivalent to generic hires. We want to move away from the paradigm of serving up tests or assessments that are just sort of like k-means tests or like a bubble sort or something like, create this recursion loop, something that's very generic and not specific to their problems. And this also makes candidates more excited for it. So let's take, for example, like Instacart. The problem could be, hey, we have this really exciting role on front-end engineering, and we want to simulate what your job would be in the real world. So we want you to do this 30-minute to an hour test on redesigning your checkout workflow. We want you to build it in React for the front end. I want you to use CSS Grid for layouts and use Redux for state. And the problem is, there's this large and ambiguous checkout workflow. I want you to find, 2 to 3 different incremental changes that we can make that will make this experience much better for our Instacart shoppers. And that's something that's like really, really fun for a candidate to solve, because it simulates like, they're going to join the front-end design team or they're going to join the front-end engineering team of Instacart and actually do these problems versus being served up a problem that's like, hey, just do a bubble sort on this array of data. And so it becomes a much more fun problem, and it gives the recruiting team and the VP of engineering a lot stronger signals on exactly how that candidate will perform once they join their team.
And in such an early stage, how are you balancing feedback that you'll get from all these different parties? Because on one hand, you have the actual engineers who are using the Ropes platform to show what they can do to potential hiring teams, but then your actual customer and the person that would be coming to Ropes is probably worried about a whole another host of things. So how are you balancing feedback between all these different parties when you're at such an early stage?
Yeah, so it's a small team, but we're sort of putting as many calories as we can on customer-facing and candidate-facing interactions. On the customer side, we're trying to talk as much as we can to the customers. We're collecting a lot of data from them. We have a lot of dedicated lines of support. So, for example, customer A/help@ropes.ai. It just gives them the sense of security that they can sort of reach out to us anytime, and we're proactively checking on them. Data is also really important for us. So we're collecting feedback on every test that the candidates are saying, from sort of a 1 to 5 score or some sort of NPS score, and we're collecting any sort of written feedback on the test. For example, I think the test was too long or too short. I think it could have been improved in this way. And this helps us get that really rapid feedback loop with each assessment. So we're doing it on all fronts, and we're really excited to see all this data come in. We're running hundreds and thousands of assessments every week with our customers, and we're able to get all these signals from both the candidates and our customers all the time.
For the Ropes team, if you guys are going to hire engineering talent, are you going to put them through the ringer of your own platform?
Yes, we're going to dogfood our product. Yeah, that's definitely a big priority for us. I'm imagining a blog post that says how Ropes used Ropes to hire, right? And it's a very good case study and a great example for how many signals you can get from this process that you wouldn't get in another with other tools. And so it's a very exciting time for us to be in, where we're looking for multiple founding engineer roles. We're talking to them. We're doing sort of the initial top of the funnel, right? We're doing the sourcing. We're looking on LinkedIn and finding these candidates. We're getting referrals from our network. We're also sending them a Ropes test, and we're seeing how they scored. And we're using the same engine that we are to build these problems, and we're using the same engine that we are today with our customers to create the results that show all of the signals, all of the highlights throughout their test. We can review and look into how they implemented the code. We can assign different scoring categories like correctness, problem solving, debugging ability, and it helps us make our hiring decisions much better.
In the Ropes assessments, are you enabling candidates to use AI to solve the issues that they may face on the engineering side of things? Because those are tools that they're going to have at their disposal on a daily basis. Are you trying to maybe assess their underlying innate talent to do things without those tools?
Yeah, so around 50% of our customers today actually allow AI LLM usage. And we actually don't have a strong standpoint on that. We've built an assessment that allows AI usage and doesn't allow AI usage, because there's a huge paradigm shift in what we're providing, right? We're not just providing sort of tests that are simple, generic things. They're large project-based assessments that simulate real-world scenarios where, hey, it turns out in the real world, you're going to need to use Cursor. You're going to need to use Devin. You're going to need to use some of these AI tools. And so what if we could vet you for how you can use Cursor? So we are very open to that world. And in fact, I think there's a direction where we can go into where, we know that LLM is going to commoditize maybe entry-level software engineering roles, or LLMs are going to commoditize other specific talent out there, but it won't wipe away jobs completely. It won't wipe away subsets of jobs completely. It'll only reduce the amount of people that are required to run a specific workflow. Let's say, for example, there's Epic is a system of record for a lot of hospitals. With AI agents, now you don't have to necessarily hire people that are really well versed in Epic. They just need to know how to use an AI agent to extract information, medical records, manipulate medical records within Epic. But there's still a skill of using that agent. You can call them agent operators. You can call them agent users. There's a world where Ropes becomes the de facto solution that tests on, if you want to hire someone that really knows how to use AI agents for hospital admin roles, or if we're using Epic, or if we're using Cerner, we can provide that for you. We just give you additional signals, especially as all of these skills, because skills are so dynamic in this AI era, there needs to be a solution out there that can help you as a hiring manager understand if this person is the right fit for this role that will end up using AI.
It's almost akin to in construction when you have someone operating these massive cranes.
Right.
Maybe these AI tools are becoming those cranes that the software engineers can use to 5x their productivity.
Yeah.
So you might not even need to assess their underlying talent. It's how productive are they going to be with the newfound tools at their disposal.
Exactly. Robot arms, humanoid robots are coming after manufacturing floors, but there's still going to be roles that are needed to operate these machines.
And we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but I'd like to circle back to it because it's something that's so emphasized in your time at McKinsey, and that's prioritization in terms of with so much to do on any given day, you could boil the ocean in so many different ways and really thinking about, okay, what is the top 5 things I need to get done today? Mm-hmm. And then what can wait till the end of the week until next week? How has that experience at McKinsey with, as they say, the fire hose every single day helped you prioritize within ropes?
Yeah.
And then also, is there anything that you've carried as someone who's come from McKinsey and helped other people at ropes implement in their own workflows and how they approach their work?
Yeah, I think the number one thing in terms of operating model and cadence with your team was something you're very familiar with, check-ins and checkouts. For the audience, check-ins and checkouts are basically a time in the morning and a time in the afternoon where the whole team meets and says during check-in, it's kind of similar to what a software engineering team would do, that's when they call it stand-up. Hey, what are my priorities right now for this day? What am I going to accomplish today? What are my big blockers? What are the key inputs I need from you as a manager? What are the key inputs I need from you as another teammate? And then at the checkout, we basically say, hey, let's review what we had committed ourselves to do. What is blocking us and what are we set to do the next morning? And then the next morning, you look at the same checkout list that you looked at yesterday, and you get to start to have all these data points of like, where is my progress towards success? And you can also sort of extrapolate that out towards like, what does my check-in and checkout look like for the week and for the month? At McKinsey, we call those work plans. So it's a bit more larger scale. I think that has been really, really helpful here at Ropes. We actually just started doing this where we have 3 times a week, weekly syncs where we cover the same questions. What are we committing ourselves to for the next 2 days? What are the roadblocks going to be? What inputs do I need from each team member? And I think that's going to be very successful. Now, the key thing at startups is, in early stage, do things that don't scale. I don't know if this will scale over time because if we have 50 people, it's hard to do that with 50 people, but you can see it start to work within smaller pods or smaller teams, just like at McKinsey, right? McKinsey, I think the New York office was like 2,500 consultants, but you're split up into individual pods with an engagement manager and 3 analysts and associate partners and partners above you. But it ends up being a pod, and that is likely how, that's how a lot of later stage software companies and larger companies do, right? They're organized within teams that's aligned to products or business lines or geographies. And we'll get there eventually, and we'll figure out what operating model works for us. But right now, it's about having those frequent connections and doing this sort of pseudo check-in, check-out.
And another thing that I know that you must have carried from McKinsey to your current role is at McKinsey, you're mostly working with software companies and go-to-market and pricing. How have those experiences really informed the way that you're maybe steering Ropes as the COO?
Yeah, I think what has been really interesting and what I've thought a lot about is one of the key values I got from McKinsey, and this goes to like your previous question, is at McKinsey, we would go really, really deep on solving a client's problem. Let's say, for example, the client wants to determine what new price level to charge for SKU 1. And we would launch an in-depth pricing survey with 300 different CIOs and decision makers. We would spend days on toiling over the questioning of each survey question and the multiple choice answers. And we would build a model and sort of model out how this pricing level change affects revenue generation and also affects churn and downsell. And that works. That works a lot for our clients. But it may not work for ropes right now because, for us to go build this survey and spend multiple days, that's a lot of customer calls that we're sacrificing, or time spent with existing customers, or time spent outbounding, time spent going to an event to find new leads, or time spent finding a new founding engineer. And so what I learned from McKinsey was I knew exactly how deep to go to solve a really, really important problem. And so, I live my life on extremes. Like I love knowing what is really, really extreme in the sense of like, now I've experienced this. And at Ropes, now I know when to pull that back to make decisions. We're in the AI space. People kind of know how to price AI. People kind of know how to price AI agents, but you don't really know exactly how it's going to work. Do I do outcome-based pricing? Do I do usage-based pricing? Do I have 3 different packaging tiers? We could spend weeks figuring out a pricing scheme that works, or we just produce one that has worked with a few pilot customers and stick with it, and we just A/B test and iterate upon that. And so what I'm trying to get at is like there is a spectrum of analytical depth that you learn from McKinsey, and in the early stage role, you start to apply that and pull back. Like, do I need to go this deep now, or do I just need to make a quick decision? For example, Google Ads. I don't know what I'm doing with Google Ads. I've never been a digital marketer. So do I need to spend a whole week perfecting the messaging, perfecting which keywords to spend on? Or do I just get something out there and see if it works? So that's been a strong learning, and I think something that I'm trying to do as the COO.
And another thing about going from McKinsey to Ropes that's 2 different ends of a very wide spectrum is that McKinsey, while you are doing all this analysis and diving so deep to help clients solve their issues, you're not ultimately making that decision. You're basically providing them the full scope of considerations, data, and analysis to make the most informed decision as possible, but you're never the one pulling the trigger as a consultant at McKinsey.
Yeah.
How is it now that you actually do all that analysis and then you're the one that says, all right, we're going to go do this? And how has that change been to actually being the one making the decisions?
Sam, it feels really good to have ownership. I had a lot of ownership at McKinsey, and they definitely, when they recruited me from Penn, that's definitely what they harped on. And I will give them credit. I had a lot of ownership for being a 22-year-old living in New York, working with CIOs, CFOs, CEOs across the globe. It was a really good moment to be in.
I'd like to make the distinction. I feel like you have a lot of ownership over your workflows, but you're not the one actually at the business or the client making the decision
exactly
to ultimately implement it at the business level.
Yeah, I didn't get to do that.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt at times like I want to be the one actually driving this change.
Yeah.
And now I'm actually doing that. For example, one of my software clients at McKinsey, we're looking deep into their marketing spend. And we said, hey, you guys might be spending a lot on events. It's time to shift over a little bit to digital. It's much easier to acquire these people at a low CAC. And we've seen other examples of this working really well with other software companies. So you guys should do that. And it stopped there. And I think it's to McKinsey's credit, like a lot of the work that we do is strategic, and that insight is very valuable because it's backed by other case studies. And we also offered, detailed plans of like how to potentially do that, but we're not really digging into the weeds. Mm-hmm. But now here I'm like, hey, like we need to go to events for marketing, and we need to do Google ads and LinkedIn ads. And so now I'm actually getting my hands dirty. Even though I don't know exactly what I'm doing, it's really fun to actually be on that side of like, hey, should we actually be spending 50% on events, or 60% or 70%? Or should I be spending 30%? The answer right now is probably more on events because we're very charismatic people, and it's probably where we're going to generate the most amount of leads.
And when you mentioned how good it feels to have ownership, you almost lit up a little bit. And, I can tell, or I could tell in that moment that is something that you really enjoy. What are maybe some other things that could be on the same or opposite side where, hey, it's so nice to have ownership, or, oh my God, there's one part of this aspect that coming from a place like McKinsey now to Ropes, it's completely different, and this is much, much more difficult than I would have anticipated?
I think it's a corollary to ownership, and I would call it like sort of agency. Ownership is sort of like, I know that I'm responsible for some sort of output, and I'm responsible for making sure all the inputs are right. But agency is like a step further from that. It is, let's go beyond the scope of what this is you have full domain on recommending if we should be attacking this problem at a completely different angle. And I think I value agency a lot more. And you rarely get that at McKinsey because there are lots of levels above you, right? There's associate partners, there's senior partners that all want to get their hands on, for example, a pricing survey, right? I cannot even tell you the amount of times where I did a pricing survey and everybody wanted to get their take on things. And I think it's warranted because at McKinsey, we always want to have a distinctive answer and their opinion is definitely warranted. But here at Ropes, like we can't afford to take time to do that. We want to move fast and make decisions fast. And that requires a team of people with high agency that can say and immediately say that I don't think we should be doing this. I think we should be trying to do something completely different. And here's the 5 points of evidence that back that up. I'm going to go chase after it. The only thing I need from you is A, B, and C. I know you have high agency and you're running your other stuff. Let's go our separate ways and let's check back in very soon.
As you now have to then present yourself as almost a steward of Ropes, at McKinsey it's the same way. You need to represent the firm when you carry yourself, but I'd say the analysts are put in a lot less of a position to do that than perhaps an associate partner, or senior partner. Now that you really are the face of a company, have you noticed any differences in the way that you might carry yourself going into events or, kind of the, I don't want to say chip on your shoulder, but kind of overall sense of responsibility that you feel over kind of the work that you're doing and how you represent Ropes?
I think it's less about how I'm representing Ropes. It's more of like always thinking about what is my goal of doing something. Let's say, for example, right now, a big priority for us is finding a founding engineer. And we went to this event recently that was hosted by South Park Commons. They're like an accelerator incubator in the New York City area. And we knew that the topic of the conversation that they had was going to be very interesting to a lot of engineers. So we were like, we need to put ourselves there and go talk to engineers. And the way I carried myself there was sort of like, I'm always wanting to be in a selling mode, right? So as soon as I walk in there, I'm looking out for people. Who do I think is an engineer? Who do I think is a confident person? Who's wearing a T-shirt right now of a Series C company that we probably can't grab? Who's wearing a T-shirt of some other company that we think is, a good fit for us? And then when we talk to people, we're kind of leading with like, hey, what are you building? I don't want to be constantly being like, hey, I work at Ropes. Here's what we do. I think you'd find this interesting. We want to learn about them first. And sort of, we're like, so that's an example of like, I'm sort of just being a chameleon and shifting the way that I'm presenting myself for what goal or outcome I want out of a specific, event that I'm at or how I am. Another example is on the weekends, we here at Ropes, we work 9 to 10, 9 to 11, 6 days a week. So we work Monday through Friday, take a break on Saturday, and we work on Sundays. But on Saturday, I'm not everything Ropes, right? I'm spending time with my girlfriend, I'm spending time with my friends, and I'm not constantly trying to sell Ropes. And so I'm more just holding myself to fit the right environment.
How have you found maybe your ability to unplug and de-stress during that Sunday to Friday stretch? And what will you do to kind of recenter yourself as maybe I'm not the CEO of Ropes right now, I'm Adam Liang during the week? Because I think that if you're so locked in for 6 days straight, it does maybe provide a benefit in terms of the output you're able to generate, but then for maybe a sustainability and endurance level, maybe that's not the best way to go about it. Of course, it is plausible to maybe work 14, 13 hours a day. And maintain that, and I think a lot of people do. I just think that in order to do that and be able to maintain that, you need to be able to step back at certain points during the day and just kind of, tone down a little bit and release a little bit. So what do you find yourself during the week to kind of allow yourself to take that step back and then come back to Ropes being your full self?
I laugh, Sam, because it's been very hard. This job is consuming, but it's consuming in a different way than at McKinsey because of all the things we talked about. Like, I have agency. I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm digging myself into new tools. I'm talking to customers. I'm stretching myself to so many different dimensions, and that is very exciting for me. It's definitely not for everyone. I wouldn't recommend early stage roles or founding a company for everyone because it is all consuming. if the assessment service is down, right, and we guarantee an SLA for customers, we need to fix that. And so that's the first point. Like it's very hard to juggle all this stuff, especially since I recently just started in the last month, and I want to front load all of this knowledge building and all of this introducing myself to customers and all of that. Like it's a bit like harder to do in the beginning, but I found ways to make it sustainable. For example, I think it's very, very important to work with people that you actually enjoy. It kind of is very analogous to being at McKinsey, being on a team. If you join a team, and for the audience, McKinsey is sort of like on a project by project basis. You have no guarantee of what your team composition is going to be, who you're going to be on teams with. But in the rare instances where you work on a team, like I worked on a team with you, Sam, and it was really awesome because we were just boys, and like we kind of were cut from the same cloth. Like we had mutual friends, and it was much easier to build camaraderie on a team that way. So I have the pleasure of working with Ken, my best friend from college. We actually share the same birthday on July 6th. We've actually celebrated our birthday the same year since freshman year in various different places around the world. So it's been very fun. Traveled the world with him. And so being with him, like it makes it so much more fun, right? If we book a customer call that landed in 2 days, I immediately jump out of the phone booth and we have like a mini celebration, right? And it's those little moments that add up that you can't structurally fix for, right? You can't say, hey, this week we need to unplug at 3 p.m. till 3:30. It's the culture that we've built within our team and the friendship that we've already had. And in the future, when we have new hires, we want to have that culture where everybody feels like they're excited and moving towards the same goal. And that makes it very sustainable. Now, that being said, I would like to work out more. I would like to run more. Thank God there's a shower in here so I can go on runs. And I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. But there will be time where I can do that. And then on Saturdays, right, it is a full unplug, right? The only time we pick up our laptop or look at things is when we think that the assessment service is down or that something in the back end is not working. But at the same time, we're executives at this company. Like we really care about this company, and we're always talking about things. And we may not be doing things, but we're always strategizing. And this is only on the Saturdays or like on a Friday night. But the rest of the days are always just working. So I think the takeaway is like there's things that I should be doing, and I'll eventually get there.
But it seems also that in this initial part of joining ropes, you're just in maybe approaching your first full month. That I think something that you said there that is quite important is to front load that knowledge building. Yeah. So that, this can be the time where you're completely locked in and building all that domain expertise to then best represent ropes rather than maybe pushing that off. And
exactly.
Based on your last response, I have two distinct questions, but I'll start with the second one that came to my mind, but I think is more related to how your answer finished there. One thing that I learned from you during our time at McKinsey was the concept of, I think you called it the 1,000 Club in terms of lifting, and that you actually got there during college. Yeah. Do you want to maybe explain to the audience what the 1,000 Club is?
Yeah. So I did a lot of weightlifting in college. I used to be a very skinny guy. I ran cross country in high school, and then I got into kind of bodybuilding. I didn't join a club or anything, but a lot of my friends were obsessed with the 1,000 Club. I think people correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the 3 or 4 core powerlifting exercises should add up to 1,000 pounds. And so that's back squat, deadlift, bench press. I think there might be another one, but I got there. At my peak, I was deadlifting 4 plates, so that was 405, and then I was able to add another 10, so that was 425. I was very impressed with myself. I was a pretty big guy. I ate a lot of food to get there. At McKinsey, I was always I wanted to focus on those sort of goals and always have velocity. It's kind of in the way that you would want to be a bodybuilder, where every single day you're I want to reach this 1,000 Club goal. I'm making incremental improvements on my core lifts. And I viewed McKinsey the same way. I viewed the activities as sort of there's a set of 10 things or maybe 20 things that you need to do to be a good analyst, and I'm going to chip away and make incremental improvements at that. For example, page making ability, talking to clients, running an expert call, building an Excel model. And all of these things, like there's a playbook for it. It's the same thing for lifting. Although lifting, it probably has a little bit more of a dimension of like you should tune it to your body because your body could be different than other people's bodies. But there's a lot of data and stories and blogs and fitness coaches out there that you can lean on to get better at your core lifts. And it was the same thing at McKinsey. And so I sort of held that close to me and leveraged as many people as I could at McKinsey to try to get to the 1,000 club at McKinsey. And
it seems like at Ropes, your probably overall hours per week is a little bit more than McKinsey. But at McKinsey, I would say the average day is ending maybe 2.5, 3 hours later than your average day at Ropes will end.
That's correct, yep.
Have you found then your ability to, if you wanted to, get in the gym and lift at Ropes is a little bit better? Because maybe if you're getting out at 10, you could, get to the gym by 10:30 and, finish lifting at 11:30 in bed by midnight? Or do you think it was actually easier to pursue these goals at a company like McKinsey?
Way easier to pursue these goals at Ropes. Because to the point on agency, like you have complete ownership and agency over like what you need to accomplish throughout the week. And there's no one breathing you over your shoulder. There's maybe the board or there's investors that want you to reach specific ARR goals. But as to how you get there, they'll have advice, but they won't question. They won't go into the granular details of like, oh, why did you work out at 10 a.m. and, miss out on an hour and a half of your day? As long as things get accomplished, people are going to be fine with that. But at McKinsey, it was kind of a culture of, you have to stay in the office. Yeah. We're going to do the dinner. We're going to stay here together. I think that was fine, but it definitely wasn't good for health and wellness. And here in the startup world, and I feel like a lot of early stage employees and founders can attest to this, like you have immense stress on, I need to grow this business. I have these aggressive goals, but I also should prioritize my health and wellness, and I can go do that anytime I want to. It's kind of like how at a lot of tech companies, they tout that they have unlimited PTO. I know that like at Ken's old company, Retool, he would always talk about how he had unlimited PTO. And like, that's an interesting thing, right? It's like, you can take as much PTO as you want and you won't be sort of penalized on it, but it just sends kind of the wrong signal if you're abusing it, right? You don't want to abuse it, and you certainly don't want to do no PTO at all. You should take whatever you feel comfortable with for you to take a break and relax and find meaningful ways to find balance to help you accomplish your goals. And that's exactly what I hope to do at Ropes. And I think to that point of balance, like right now, I want to front load everything. And so I'm more prioritizing the work and this knowledge building and setting up all this stuff with my team and getting these early hires through the door. But then over time, like I'll shift the balance and try to prioritize my health.
And the second question I had from what we were talking about previously is, in this culture of you're maybe working 13, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, and now you're going out and trying to find a founding engineer.
Yeah.
I know that engineering culture a lot of times is 9 to 5. I'm going to work within that window, or work even less if I can get everything that I need to get done. If I can finish 10 hours of work in 5 hours, I'll take those other 5 hours back. How are you selling a company to an engineer that might want that balance? But ideally at this point in an early stage startup, you'd want someone who's going to be, going as all in right on the train there with you guys.
Yeah. I think the way we're framing it, and I think we've had a lot of recognition from the engineers that we've talked to that this will be hard. The way that we're framing it is we always start with like, this is why this is such a big problem and such an exciting place to be in. Here's me and Ken and Zach's stories and our other employees of like why we joined and why we made the jump. I think like my story is really important, jumping from a very stable job at McKinsey with a lot of money and a lot of like people that I loved and people that loved me, and starting with our stories and trying to get them aligned to the mission. And most of the time, like they are. And just the conversation on the work-life balance sort of comes at the end and becomes something that they just have to wrestle with, just like me and Ken did, because we were so driven by the mission that we knew that in order to get there, we knew we'd have to wrestle with this work-life balance. So it's never really something where we look up front when we're sourcing candidates or when we're talking to candidates that we say, we want you to grind, right? We want you to work X amount of hours in the week. There's no rules and thresholds for that. It's more of just like, I want you to be aligned to the mission, and our team's going to do whatever it takes to get there, and we would expect you to do that, if that makes sense.
In joining a company where now you're the COO and the original founder is your best friend, obviously you're working with someone who you love, very well, and are excited to see every day at the office. But what are maybe some of the more difficult parts of maybe working so intimately with your best friend that you've experienced? And are there even any difficulties that you've noticed, or have you only found that has a positive impact on your working relationship?
Yeah, I think one of my brother's founder friends said this really well. I kind of asked him the exact same question, and I'll just play back his words. Shout out Philip Liang, CEO of Gather. He said, early founder misalignments or early employee misalignments, it comes down to really two root causes. The first is ego, right? The individual ego of the people in question. And the second one is misalignment on direction. I think that the second one, misalignment on direction, is fully under your control for both people. Let's say, for example, we're very misaligned on what the next product direction we should go into. Right now we're in mostly technical talent. Hey, do we want to go into finding a way to solve the nursing skill shortage, right? Find a way to upskill nursing talent, find a way to vet for better nurses. Or do we want to go into the sourcing layer of the talent journey? Or do we want to go into upskilling? Or do we want to go into manufacturing talent? Those strategic decisions are very big decisions that impact who we hire, how we go to market, and the product that we build, and the amount of time that it'll take, the engineering hours to get this product shipped. And I still think that's very much under control, right? It's about making sure that we recognize each other's biases, or we recognize the early team's biases, and we're clearly mapping out like all the pros and cons of things. I know it's very simple to say, but people often have the tendency, it's just a human tendency to be so biased and so opinionated. And it's sort of like my job and each other's jobs to really pressure test each other, and make sure that we're thinking about all the alternatives and really digging into the why we're choosing a specific direction. And if you don't have that alignment, when things start to happen and engineering hours are spent on something and someone isn't really fully bought in, that's when disputes happen. And that's where it gets really dangerous, because then someone quits or someone leaves and there's like disputes over equity. But I still think that can be controlled. Now, on the ego side, that is something that's like fundamentally innate to you, right? Like, are you someone whose like ego is really harmed when you feel like someone says something about the business? Does it feel like a personal attack to you? Are you someone who is more of like an introvert and you feel like you're being left out in a meeting? Are there ways that like we should all be conscious of bringing you in the loop and having your voice be heard more? And that ego thing is something that I think is a little bit harder to control, but by really understanding someone or really understanding, your best friend, you can think about ways to mitigate those from happening when disputes are naturally going to occur.
When you decided to make this jump and leave McKinsey for Ropes, what was the general reaction of the people around you, maybe your closest friends, your girlfriend, your family? Were people overall overwhelmingly excited for you and saw the vision of Ropes? Were some people nervous? Kind of how was that received in your close network of people around you?
Yeah, I think I had a couple of friends that said, "Hey, I want to write an angel check now." Now I'm more bullish on on Ropes.
Yeah, because I guess they already knew it from Ken.
Yeah, because they already knew it from Ken. So I think the first segment was sort of Ken and I's mutual friends from college. A lot of people were very excited because now they were already excited that Ken was doing it, and now it's great to see two of their friends working together. Especially because they've seen me and Ken have great relationships in college, and they've seen us work together, and so they get even more excited for us doing that. My girlfriend was also very excited. I think she saw her main point of contention was like, oh, he's going to work just as hard as McKinsey, and I validated with her, yeah, that's pretty much right. But I think the sell to her was that I'll get a lot of career growth from this, and I think there will be times where I will have, and across the board, like I'll have more agency, so I'll be able to take the opportunity to like rest whenever I want to, as opposed to having sort of the structure and the regiments of an organization like McKinsey dictate my schedule. And I think she was very into that. My parents and my brother were also very excited. I think probably the hardest people to convince were my parents. They come from China, they're immigrants, and they sort of were always sold into like the corporate America ideal where there's job security. But they've come around from it, and they saw like from their friends and their friends' children starting companies that this is a real way to learn and grow as an individual, also with the upside of making money or wealth accumulation, which was always like low down on my criteria. So they eventually came around with multiple calls, trying to convince them. But I was lucky enough that he was already exposed to some of my older brother's friends starting companies that he felt safe to give me sort of the green light on the decision. And I think what made him convinced was not necessarily the pitch that I was giving to him, but his feeling, his confidence that from me sort of talking to other people, like I would always tell him like, hey, I talked to these 3 former managers of mine at McKinsey. I talked to my older brother Michael's friends who started a Sequoia-backed startup, and that really gave him confidence. So I think for him it was a lot about like references and seeing that there were other success stories out there. Even though the market always says that the success rate of a startup is like, sub 1%.
Yeah. And by him there, just to clarify, you were talking about your father.
My father.
Right?
Yeah.
And another thing I'd like to note there, though, is while there is a lot of job security at a place like McKinsey in the short term, I feel like in the long term, in order to keep your job, you really need to put in an insane amount of hours and effort. And even then, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
When we first joined, there was that whole shift where I think associate partners who weren't distinctive all kind of got offered an exit package, and if you didn't take the exit package, which was an incredibly generous exit package, I remember hearing about it.
I remember it was crazy. It was like multiple months.
So that wasn't necessarily pulling the rug out from anybody.
Yeah.
But there isn't necessarily that level of job security that you maybe might think. But I'd also say McKinsey, on the other hand, compensates you very well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of perks. So maybe you're making that trade-off of, it very much is up or out, but there are a lot of other benefits that come to it. And I'm curious for you, you were started at McKinsey a year before me, but what was the precipitating moment for why now? Why was March 2025 the moment for you of, hey, I want to leave McKinsey and go pursue startups? And was startups always what you thought you might do next beyond the firm, or were there other areas that you were also interested in?
Yeah, I think the catalyst was whenever I reached a crossroad. And that's generally how my life has been lived. When I had a crossroad of like, oh my God, I got to go to college. And now I have to actually sit down and reflect and write my Common App essay and decide like what major I want to pick. It was the same thing at McKinsey, right? I reached the 2.5 mark and I started doing like a junior engagement role. I had an associate under me that I was managing sort of complete ownership over her. And I was at the point where I was a couple months or like away from doing a full engagement manager role. And I thought to myself, like, is this something that I want to do? Like, what are the other alternatives out there? Hey, my friend just, raised money for his company. Let me just dig in deep there and like try to understand like if that could be a good fit. I'm also getting all these inbound messages from headhunters about private equity roles, tech roles. And so being in that crossroad moment was the catalyst definitely for me. As far as like why I chose the early stage world, I go back to like a lot of feedback that I got at McKinsey was really centered around that, Adam, like you move really fast. I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. That's a lot of what I heard, velocity. And I always use this phrase a lot, velocity. Mm-hmm. When I was JEMing my associate, I would always tell her like, we need more velocity, right? We need to move fast. I loved to move fast. And I thought more about that and like all the feedback that I got about that, how it was both a good thing and a bad thing. I want to be in a place where velocity is the currency for success. And I thought to myself, like, being in the startup world, that's all it is. Like, shipping features fast, moving fast, A/B testing things, right? If the Google ads aren't working, let's switch to something else. We don't need this analytical depth on this specific position. We just need to move fast right now. And I was really excited by that moment because I just love to move fast. I think that at McKinsey, there were times where I felt like I was being held back a bit. Like, I felt like at times, like, I wasn't able to move fast enough, right? So that was sort of the inclination. I was like, do I want to become an engagement manager and sort of live the same feelings that I was having and be in the same culture? And I will say, McKinsey does move really fast, but it might move fast in a different way, right? Like, I wanted change to happen at an organization really fast, but there's all these like political hoops that you have to jump through internally and also at a specific client. But in the startup world, it's like you can really enact change for your customers and for the product that you're building and for the team that you're building in much shorter cycles.
One thing that you touched on there that I also really felt is in speaking to a lot of the engagement managers that I worked with, I know that in hearing from them the trade-offs they were making to work in that EM role and why they were making those trade-offs and sacrifices and what they hoped to get out from it, I didn't think necessarily equated for the reasons that I would do it. And therefore I thought that, hey, it's probably worth doing diligence and all the other different things I could do in my career at this point. And for you now, kind of in this early stage transition to ropes and thinking further down the line, what are maybe your goals, not only for ropes in the next 6 months, year, but then personally for your own development? And what do you hope to get out of this experience? Obviously, if it goes perfectly, you'll still be working out ropes in 10, 15, 20 years, maybe if that's what you want. Yeah. But, how are you approaching your own personal development and growth and kind of framing that to yourself and thinking about it as you've made this transition?
Yeah, I think one of the first priorities is, growing a company from, zero to, $1 billion valuation or $5 or $10 billion valuation. That is a huge priority and sort of like something that a lot of people talk about, like founders and angel investors and VCs. They that's like the holy grail, like reaching unicorn status. But what does that actually really mean? Like, what does that come with? That's sort of like where my goals lie. Within that, I think, number one, and I always talk about career growth, and I know that's kind of a vague thing, but the number one goal for me is over the course of, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, to be sort of like a domain expert in something, whether it's leading a sales organization, whether it's really understanding how to do growth marketing or doing experiments with different marketing channels, or whether it's being a domain expert in hiring. Like, hiring is a very hard problem that, we're experiencing that, there's no perfect formula. It's an art more than a science. And if I can be someone in the world, in New York City, that can serve as an advice line to younger people that'll be in my shoes in a few years, that's a really, really powerful feeling and a lasting legacy that I'll have. And so I'm very excited to sort of get this sort of expertise in something. And then the second thing is sort of on the impact side of ropes, right? Ropes' ultimate mission is to just fundamentally change how human talent is identified and nurtured, empowering organizations to have as many signals as they can, as many data points as they can about the people that they bring into their company and how they nurture that talent over time. And it is a human capital efficiency problem that is very exciting to be in. If we can sort of cement ourselves as the de facto vetting layer, if we can cement ourselves as a thought leader within the hiring world, within the skills economy, that is a really, really powerful goal to go after. And it's very fulfilling to be part of that journey. I look at all the greats, right? Google, NVIDIA, all these companies have cemented themselves in some sort of niche, like, building compute, building the future of search, building the future of cloud computing. And it's a very cool legacy to be a part of that can span beyond, the lifetime of my life. If ropes sustains beyond my life, that would be really, really great to be able to feel like I've had a legacy on the world.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Stroll. If you like this episode, and would like to be in the loop for future episodes while also supporting the podcast, please subscribe to the podcast here and follow the podcast on social media for updates. Our Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are @thestroll_podcast, and our X account is @thestroll_pod. I'd like to give another big thank you to Adam for being willing to come on the podcast and for speaking about his experience at Ropes thus far. Thank you again for listening. Much love, one love.